Well, good morning, Savannah, Georgia. Good morning. It is a bright and sunshiny day, and we're glad to be with you right here in Chatham County. We have with us this morning none other than our representative Ann Westbrook from the 163, and she will be sharing some information with us this morning. We also have with us our co-host, Ms. Natavia Sanders, and she's here with us. She's going to be aggravating and asking some questions.
Really?
Really? And we're going to get down to it and get some information so that our vulnerable community will know what's going on. Uh, Ann Westbrook, good morning to you. We have been waiting to get you on this podcast to make sure that we can get the right information and we get it straight from, as they say it, from the horse's mouth. I do know that you have at least one event coming up, and if you put that date out first, and then we'll come back later on and let you put it out again, so that we can be in attendance to that date.
Okay,
So
great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this morning. It's always a pleasure to join y'all. The conversation is always substantive and informative, and so it's just a thrill to be on with you this morning. I do have an event coming up very soon. I am a member of a committee. We call it the Freedom to Be Heard Committee, and what this committee is working on is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a very old concept, but it's one that has gotten very sort of politicized lately. And so we thought it would be a good idea to just get folks together and talk through what it means to them, just hear from the community. We're going to be hearing from educators, from community leaders, from students, from business folks, business owners, and folks who work in the business community, just about what they have found the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion to be. We live in an incredibly diverse country. We live in an incredibly diverse state of Georgia. And so we really just wanted to have this opportunity to come together and talk about this, kind of get away from the politicized idea of this concept and just talk about what it means, to everyday folks living their lives in their diverse communities. I will say, this is a group of House reps from throughout the state of Georgia. We are led by Rep. Carolyn Hughley of Columbus, but we've got a real diverse community. We tried to have as much geographic representation as we could possibly get on this community. So we've got Metro Atlanta, we've got Savannah, we've got the suburbs, we've got the cities. And so that's what we're doing. The one that we're having in Savannah is Monday, August 26th. It's going to be at 6 p.m. at Hotel Indigo downtown. So we do hope folks will join us. And if you want to learn more, I've got a flyer up on my social media so people can see, who's on the committee. And also they can sign up to speak if they want to, because, this is really just as strong as, the strength of this event is going to be in the broad range of voices we hear from. Our committee is going to be doing a lot more listening than talking. It's the community we want to hear from. The last thing I'll say is one of these has already been done in Atlanta, and it was a big success. That was about a week ago. And there will also be one in Albany the day after the one in Savannah. So we really do want to bring this around the state. There's so much more to Georgia than just Metro Atlanta, which is what a lot of folks think of when they think of Georgia. So we want to really bring this to the whole state.
Well, now, when we were getting ready to come on the show, you came on the end of a conversation, but is that part of the conversation that y'all want to have?
I missed the conversation. So yeah.
I didn't ask that question. He did it first. Just remember that. Let the record show.
Okay.
So basically,
we were talking about reparation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just saying, is that part of the conversation that y'all would be including in y'all workshop?
As I mentioned, this is really a hearing for folks to come in and talk about whatever they want to talk about. So I definitely could see reparations being a part of that conversation. It's certainly something that is being discussed under the Gold Dome in Atlanta. We've got some real work to do building broader support for that. So I hope that will come up at our hearing. And if it doesn't, maybe one of the members of our committee can sort of, move it in that direction.
And can you just expand? So if that's not one of the things, what could we expect in some kind of hearing like that? What are you guys expecting to come up?
Well, I can speak a little bit to some of the different sectors I've reached out to kind of publicize this event and encourage people to attend. I've reached out to some of the larger employers in our community. So I think some of those folks will come. I've reached out to smaller employers as well, because big business and smaller businesses they don't work exactly the same way. I've reached out to HR professionals. Mm-hmm. I've reached out to educators, both at the high school level and also at the collegiate level to ask for their participation. Mm-hmm. So we expect this to really be wide ranging, but we expect it to be very community led. So,
who would be the community? Because I heard a lot of civic. I didn't hear any grassroots targeting. So
right. Well, my personal targeting has been to educators, to business, to community members. But I've also been in touch with more grassroots folks as well, and it'll be up to them, whether they want to participate. But we are certainly hoping for a good outcome. I should also say the organization we're working with on this is American Progress Rising. So if people want to check out their website, they'll find more information there. And it'll really just be up to, who's intrigued by this in the community and who wants to participate. We hope it'll be really broad ranging.
Have you invited labor to the table?
Oh, sorry.
I haven't made that specific outreach, but I should do that. And some of my colleagues have, because I said this is a big committee. But that is a really good reminder you just gave me. Thank you.
What about rural Georgia? I didn't hear you mention rural Georgia.
Well, we're having a hearing in Albany. So
would that be considered rural?
Well, it's at least southwest. Okay. And so, Albany's a city. We have to we can't go to all 159 counties. We just don't have those kinds of resources. But when we go places like Albany, then, that's going to pull from that whole Southwest Georgia region, which is very rural. But one thing to maybe flag about this is, one reason we do these hearings is, I'm a Democrat. I serve as a member of the minority party. And one of the challenges of being part of the minority party is we don't necessarily have the ability to get our value propositions heard, if you know what I mean. We don't control the standing House committees. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to talk about something like DEI, if we want to talk about something like gun safety or reproductive health or maternal mortality, we have to sort of find a way to do those outside those formal House committee channels. And that's kind of what this is. The reality is it's hard for Democrats to get elected in rural Georgia. And partisan gerrymandering is a part of that conversation. And so we're sort of working with what we have. And that means, folks the most rural parts of the state that have Democrats elected are going to be places like Albany. A few other, we've got some representation in West Georgia and Middle Georgia, but it's, the nature of partisan gerrymandering means that our Democrats tend to be from cities. So that's just something we work through. Okay.
So the DEI, we hear that acronym all the time. Mm-hmm. Most people know what words it stands for. I guess it's diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And so when you're breaking down those three words and understanding, what have you seen so far in your efforts as it relates to equity, the equity of DEI?
Well, I mean, I think, equity is different from equality. So, we can't have equity means kind of recognizing, I think, that we come from different experiences, and what one Georgian may need or may be focused on is going to be different from others.
Would
Based
it
on
be more like a target of the marginalized communities? Like would it be sectioned off like marginalized communities when
I
you're
think
trying to
that's
measure
fair.
the equity?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair characterization. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So then one of the marginalized communities, as we talked about earlier, would be the Black community, and understanding that although there has been other groups that have been mistreated by America, they have been given some kind of compensation. Everybody seems to know the Black story, and I see it on all of the platforms when it comes to DEI, actually. But it's kind of like becoming a background kind of thing. It's like, okay, yeah, we know that reparations never been paid, but we're going to put it on her. But I usually just see a lot of the other marginalized community efforts going forward, and that's kind of just been falling in the background. Is there a way that, if from your expertise, that we could find a way to kind of pull that to the forefront again? Because I imagine that's where it started on. I know history a little bit, where it was kind of like the Black, oppression, and the women oppression, and then now the women rights has taken off big time, and all type of stuff has happened that marginalized group. But do you think that there's a way, if we were to ask you how to do it, would you have some way to get it started?
Reparations? Yeah, I mean, I think I'll give you my perspective as a sitting legislator in the state of Georgia.
Yes, ma'am.
And I definitely agree with you that the way we experience marginalization in Georgia is going to be different than how marginalization has been experienced, maybe on the West Coast somewhere, or
yes, ma'am,
the industrial cities of the North and Midwest. But I'll just give you my very Georgia-centric perspective, and that's that in Georgia. About 32% of our population is African American, and so that we are a former Confederate state. I mean, this is just our history, and so that's the lens through which I look at it. The efforts I've seen in the legislature, there are folks working on this, and my colleague from the Chatham delegation, Carl Gilliard, has been at the forefront of this. The Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. In Georgia, we have the largest legislative Black caucus in the country. No state has a larger legislative Black caucus than we do in Georgia. So that's very much kind of our lens in Georgia. And one way that things get started in our legislature is often with a study committee, because when you look at something like systemic racism and how long it's gone on, and the fact that we haven't done any kind of reparations remedy in our history, and the different ways that it plays out. And so many of the problems we work on in the legislature, we work on healthcare disparities, and there's a racial aspect to that. Who is having these maternal mortality outcomes, or health outcomes, or whatever. We can look at it through education. Which population is struggling most with under-resourced schools? All of those things. Race is always going to be in there. It's always going to be part of it. So the way this has, probably the most promising bill addressing this right now is a study committee. And that's how a lot of things start. We sit down, we look at the problem, we invite in experts and say, tell us about maternal mortality for Black women in Georgia. Tell us about poor educational outcomes. Tell us about Black businesses and, in access to capital and all those kinds of things. So we bring in those experts. We kind of try to get our hands around this very big issue. And then we come up with solutions. And, when we do study committees in the legislature, that often leads to specific, okay, this is what we heard in our study. We heard that we need to establish more medical training programs at HBCUs. Maybe that would help us deal with these racial disparities in healthcare. That's just one example. But yeah,
And
that's
hold on to that thought. Hold on to that thought for just a
sure.
minute. We'll be
Okay.
right back after this quick break.
Hey there. Are you ready to amplify your voice and embrace your passion? Tune in to Our Black Media Network, where community comes first and every story matters. We're here 24/7, delivering powerful content on everything from financial literacy to the latest in sports and mental health. We are unapologetically real, reflecting the heartbeat of our community with programs that inspire, empower, and drive change. Join us on all major media platforms to celebrate our unique voices and advocate for the change we want to see. With over 50K monthly viewers, our network is your go-to destination for authentic, engaging content. Be a part of the movement. Be a part of the change. Tune in to Our Black Media Network today and let your voice be heard.
Now we're back, and Ann, you started a conversation on what it would be like to have the HBCUs with different studies. Go ahead, and I'm gonna let you finish that, okay?
Right. I think I was just sort of explaining how things often work when we're sort of trying to address something that we know is an issue. We know it needs our attention, but we want to be intentional about solutions that actually get at the problem. And so what that means in a study committee is we bring in experts and we talk about it. And one of the biggest pushes we've had as Democrats is addressing the really serious lack of access to health care in Georgia. And when we talk about marginalized communities, when we talk about how that plays out in Georgia, it often means racial disparities that are experienced by Black Georgians more than they are experienced by anybody else. Not that rural women don't have issues with maternal mortality, they do, but these things are most pronounced in our marginalized communities.
Right, and sitting here at 46 years old, I heard that answer at 26.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the study. We got to study some more. We don't know enough. I've watched this HR 40 bill not go anywhere for year after year. And it's just like, I think it just, again, like I said earlier, it's definitely part of all the marginalized community talk as it relates to trying to show the oppression that has been going on for a long time in America. But, I feel like it's something more tangible that can be done other than a study, because I think we got enough studies that could definitely already show where the disparity is and show that if you infuse the equity in, what could make a difference, and yes, health is definitely important. Just understanding that we are such a diverse country and we do have different marginalized communities that are continually growing as people immigrate into the to the country, and they become subjected to the same oppression, racism or whatever you want to call it. So I heard a study being needed, I guess, but could you go back and look at some of all the other old studies and do something with that?
It's not a new study. It's much more about the procedure of how we get policy in Georgia. We want to, this is a big issue. It's not, we get a lot of things passed in Georgia that we're like, okay, we don't have, people are dying from opiate overdoses. Let's get opioid antagonists in more places. Like this issue of racial disparities and reparations touches every aspect of life. And in Georgia, it touches, most closely about a third of our population. Mm-hmm. And so those are really big issues. It's not that we need to study it again. It's that when we pass policy, we want to make sure we're getting at the problem. We're going to do something that's actually going to make fewer Black women die in the 1 year postpartum. Like, we're really trying to get at these at these issues. But you kind of brought up another issue, I think, which is that you've been hearing about this for a long time. And to me, this is where we tie into so many other issues that threaten our democracy. Part of why you've heard about it a long time, but you haven't really seen the action you want to see, is that there are so many barriers to people getting the representation they want and getting the outcomes from those representatives that they want. And some of that is, again, we're talking about things like partisan gerrymandering. We have 78 seats in the Georgia House of Representatives. You have to have 91, or you have to convince a bunch of Republicans to come with you. And the majority party is not with us on this yet. We have a lot of work to do there. Or alternatively, we can keep building our political power in our chamber, and that's what we are doing.
Right.
Well,
So could people power work?
I gave you. Let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying the studies that people do, y'all are the minority. Remember the minority party.
Right.
Is the studies not a smoke screen just to keep saying we're not going to do anything, but you might be trying to do something. Y'all might be trying to do something, but the Republicans are saying, well, we do this to as a smoke screen to make it look like we're trying to do something, but then they don't have any intention of doing anything.
I think that is very fair, and I think, and I will say, this is a bill to get a study committee. We don't even have this passed yet. We can't get to 91 votes to even have to even have the study committee. We are asking for it. That's our process. But generally speaking, is that how it sometimes works? Yes. We will give you this thing you want to make you happy in the short term, to make it look like we're doing something in the short term, because we don't want to fund HBCUs or fund, free lunch for public school kids or whatever it is. So yes, I mean, I don't think that's cynical at all. I think that's very realistic. That is how it works sometimes. But for me, I got to keep fighting and just, get to that point. So for me, what that looks like is encouraging people to engage in the political process so that we can get to 91 votes as Democrats, and we can advance our value propositions, like looking at reparations, like, protecting workers in Georgia, like, fully funding public schools and fulfilling our constitutional obligation to Georgia's children, for example.
I tell you, when I was listening, and I kept hearing, and I said, this is nothing more than a smoke screen that they're putting up, making people think that they're doing something, and it's not being done. But on the other hand, I realized that when you are in the minority, you have to work your way and manipulate your way to get yourself to the point where you can do something. So other than the studies, what else do you have going on?
Well, we have a lot going on. I would say the first thing I want to make people aware of, too, is obviously, unless you've been living under a rock, we have a presidential election this year. And we have not just a presidential election, but we've got races all the way up and down the ballot that are so important. And so as much as, the presidential election tends to get all the media attention and that sort of thing, people really need to know how important these other races are. Your county commission, who represents you on the Chatham County Commission absolutely matters. Your state house rep matters. Your, school board elections have already happened, but all of those down ballot races are so critically important. We do not want people to check out once they've made their decision about the presidential election. The other thing to remember, and this ties into some of the things we've already talked about, is the Georgia State Elections Board is making changes now, less than 90 days out from the presidential election, only about 2 months from early voting, the Georgia State Elections Board is making significant changes to how county elections officials certify elections, and people need to be watching that. What can ordinary folks do? You got to have your plan to vote. Got to make sure your registration is up to date. Know how to check it again. mvp.sos.ga.gov is how you can check to make sure it's current. But these are the kinds of things I'm kind of talking about in terms of we will not have the policy we want, the representation we want, if we don't get serious about addressing some of these obstacles that are anti-democratic. I'm talking small d now, that are just designed to keep people from participating or getting the outcome that they're voting for. So changes to our state elections board is part of that. The other things we're working on, and I think that this ties into our conversation about marginalized communities, is that we're always looking at ways to expand opportunity in Georgia. Opportunity and access to a quality education is huge. Georgia children have a constitutional right to a public education. That doesn't mean you get a great education if you win a lottery or that sort of thing. That means we have an obligation under our Constitution to provide this to you. And so, in my party, we're looking hard at, efforts to restrict access to quality public schools. Again, we've talked about healthcare already. That's part of it. Budget justice is one thing we talk about as well. We are a state that has a multi-billion-dollar budget surplus. We have had that now for several years running. And it gets pitched as like, oh, isn't it great we have a budget surplus? Well, okay, yeah, it's certainly better than having a deficit, and our Constitution in Georgia doesn't allow us to run deficits. But do we really have a surplus? Do we have a surplus in a state where you are more at risk having a baby in this state and dying in the first year after you have that baby? Because we're not addressing healthcare disparities, where people don't have access to quality public education, to childcare. We can't work and provide for our families if we don't have access to childcare. And markets don't fix everything. Sometimes the market just doesn't provide the childcare that people need in order to provide for their families. So, it's a misnomer to say we have a budget surplus when we have these great unmet needs in Georgia.
I would say, when you said that about the surplus, we have so many rural counties that hospitals have closed down, and people having to sometimes drive 3 and 4 hours to get to a hospital. And it's unfair because they're lacking the medical attention that they need and the service that they need when, like you said, they're sitting on billions of dollars when $1 million could just put a hospital in somewhere in the neighborhood.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, we are, I've talked a lot about this issue of maternal mortality because I think it's unconscionable that we have this problem in Georgia. But part of it is we don't have OBGYNs in half our states. Half our 159 counties in Georgia don't have a single OBGYN practicing. Then you lose your rural hospital, as you pointed out. We've lost 7 or 8 in Georgia because we have refused to expand Medicaid. For more than 10 years now, we've refused to do that. The governor has his own program that has not been a success. It hasn't had a lot of signups. And so we still have hundreds of thousands of Georgians caught in a coverage gap. There are counties in Georgia that have no MDs at all. There's no doctor to see. So we have tremendous healthcare deserts in rural Georgia. That's an economic development issue as well. If people can't see a doctor in your county, they're not moving to your county to open a new business. They're not going to employ 10 more people in your county. So, that's definitely something that we're facing in Georgia. And so we need to be real clear about that when we talk about these surpluses. We've been told for years that a recession is coming. I think that the Biden-Harris administration deserves a great deal of credit for addressing the inflation problem. It's not gone yet. We know prices are still high, but it is coming down. And it's one of the few times in our history we've been able to address inflation without triggering a recession. And that's part of why we see these surpluses, because we keep waiting for the recession that hasn't come yet, thank goodness. But we've got too many people suffering to be sitting on billion-dollar surpluses in Georgia.
I agree with you. We have had the pleasure of being joined by our other co-host, Reverend Alan Maynard. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come right back, and we'll be right back with y'all with the last half of this program.
Hello, I'm Richard Coleman, and I'm running for the office of Sheriff of Chatham County. And when I'm elected, I promise to inspect what I expect. Chatham County, it's time for a change, and that change is me, Richard Coleman.
All right, we're back. And we have been experiencing a high volume. And when I say high, I mean a high volume of people being put out of their homes. And we're going to let Reverend Maynard start on that subject.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Westbrook. Good morning, Ms. Sanders. Good morning, Elder Jerome. I came in on the end of State Representative Westbrook speaking on health care.
I think
as we know, we understand that economically. Am I froze? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you
now. You stop for a moment.
Okay. I do apologize. Well, let me recap what I said. Like I said, I came in the last end of State Representative and Westbrook saying about the healthcare. Healthcare and homelessness go hand in hand. So we know that there's a desert as well with homelessness in our county. We have formulated and did something we call a rent party coalition, where we'll find out that there's a need in our community, and we'll galvanize and we'll throw a rent party like they did in the 70s. The ideal came from a young lady, an elderly lady with a special needs son. She was being put out, and she needed some help at that time, and I could not find a way to help her. I reached out to everyone, but the Lord told me to I was looking at Good Times, and the Lord said, "Do you get it?" They were having a rent party, and I just sat there and I watched it, and I said, the community came together to make sure that this lady would not be put out of her home. And I said, wow. And we used to do that in the 70s. So then as the day progressed, I went on and I went to sleep, and I had the television on, and Good Times came on again with that same rent party. I said, okay, I hear you, Lord. And so we started something called the Rent Party Coalition, where we come in and we help people who are in need. And so I keep looking around. I look around Savannah, and I find that is a real necessity, that not only healthcare but homelessness. We have to be as prominent as Savannah is, and with an economic uh, the economic background that we have, with tourism reaching like 3.2 billion dollars in our city alone. Why are we so far behind? Why aren't any of the people getting any of that? Why is our districts looking like this? Why are we in a desert? Why are we so far behind? And it comes from not sharing the wealth. It comes from everybody not having a piece of the pie. It comes from everybody not being a part of the conversation. It comes from us not knowing how to start the conversations. So, uh, that's why we got involved, and we're asked the community to help us, help them as well. It doesn't take but $5 to help a person. If we can send $5 overseas, we can do it right here, because the Bible said charity begins at home and spreads abroad.
All right. And we as far as, and I know you are a Savannian, and you know about the homelessness that goes on statewide. I know there's homelessness everywhere, but is there any effort statewide to help local authorities with homelessness?
Yeah, this is a hugely important topic right now, and I want to just thank Reverend Maynor for the work that you've done as an individual. And I know you're not alone doing it, but all the folks that are sort of out there standing in the gaps that exist in this community. And certainly there are massive gaps around housing and homelessness. It's, homelessness is one part of this problem, but affordable housing is a broader problem than even just homelessness. Homelessness is sort of what we see at one end of it, but we have a housing shortage nationwide. We have a housing shortage in the state of Georgia. And the great work that individuals do is wonderful and so needed, but we need systemic, responses to this as well. And, one of the challenges that we experience in Georgia, I think, and this is me again speaking as a state legislator, is we are a very strong property rights state in Georgia. And we don't, and we also, our state government, the body I serve in, preempts local governments from doing many, many things. And one of those things has to do with housing. So, so again, we run into this issue of we don't quite have the political power in Atlanta to do things like rent control. There are places in the country where they have rent control. We don't have that here, and we can't have it as a matter of law right now. So we've got to build affordable housing, and the economic incentives are not there in Georgia. People, these folks who build apartment buildings they can make more money off of a luxury building. And it's a real problem because I see in my district, I drive down Montgomery Street and I see these beautiful apartment buildings going up. But I also see a lot of my residents getting pushed out because they can't afford to keep their housing with the pressure that puts on the market. So I think some of it, again, I'm a legislator, so I clearly believe in the political process and the electoral process, and the legislative process should be a part of this conversation, and we've got to build the political power. I will say on a hopeful note that no one in the legislature, including my Republican colleagues who see this problem very differently than I do, this is a problem in Georgia. No one is denying the problem here. It's not affordable to live. The salaries in Savannah do not keep pace with the cost of housing in Savannah. They just don't. It's pushing people way out of town. It's keeping young folks from buying homes and starting to build wealth. That kind of gets back to what we were talking about early on is, racial disparities and the racial wealth gap is real. We want people to be able to build for their future. So, for me as a legislator, we've got to start looking at policy solutions at the state level, or let our local governments do it. Give them more freedom to address some of these problems in their local communities.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because, like you said, a living wage can help us be sustainable. If we had a living wage put in place,
Yes.
as you said, we need affordable housing and workforce housing.
Yes.
Because if we don't have workforce housing, you can, like you said, you're going to push me out of the county, where that way gentrification has already had begun, and you have succeeded to doing what you want to do by taking over the city. So instead of pushing us out, work with us and let us work with each other,
Yes.
and we can build our economy up. We can build, like you said, generational wealth that I can leave to my children, my children's children. But if you're pushing us out and you're making it ridiculously high for us to live, we can't live where my grandparents used to own a house. We can't live where my uncle owned a house because we're being forced out. So we do understand that there is a need.
And folks get to, the folks who built this community should get to stay in this community, and they shouldn't be pushed out by market forces because somebody wants to, make a buck. We've got to look at the incentive structures that are in place because, what we love about Savannah is, the diversity and, all the families who have been here building this community before it became a big tourist destination, before it became, the hot place to move to. People should get to stay in the neighborhoods they built.
Yes, because now, like you say, we're not worried about the people. We're worried about developments, and that's where we come in and we say, hey, are you not compassionate enough to know that this is a part of your community? This is where we started. Why are you pushing us out? Because you want to get in bed with the developers. We need to have, if the developer wants to come into our community, they need to have a conversation with us in our community and find out what our needs are. And instead of just pushing housing on us and making a density, we have a density here in Savannah now. That's crazy because we used to have acreage. We used to have space. Now we're on top of each other. This is, and I'm all for growth. And infrastructure growth, but let us be at the table. Let us also have a piece of the pie because the developers are taking this money and they're going back to their cities.
It's true.
None of this money is staying in Chatham County. None of this money is staying in Savannah. None of this money is staying in the first district. None of this money is staying in none of our districts. It is being taken out of our communities. So we can't gain wealth. We can't have generational wealth because we can't obtain any.
Right. And and moving out to the county is not moving farther out is not a perfect solution anyway. Even if you want to do it, I mean, no one should be pushed somewhere. But then you're looking at commuting costs. You're looking at having to be more reliant on a vehicle, putting more miles on it. All of those kinds of things. So it's not a fair trade to move anyway.
No. And I want to say something to y'all before you take a break. We're coming back together. We're going to come back together, and we're going to do another. It's called the Rent Party, but we're going to move the location, and we're asking everybody who has a need to please come. We want to find out what the needs are, so we can address needs in our community, and also how to address the needs. Back to you, Mr. Jerome.
At that party, we will also invite our representatives to be at that party so they can hear for themselves what is going on. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back. I ain't say all that.
I didn't.
right, we're back. You know, I'm gonna say something, and I'm gonna make a whole lot of people mad when I say what I say this morning. But when we start talking about what's going on in our community, a lot of our leaders don't want to hear from the people who it's happening to. They want to hear from the big time ministers. They want to hear from so-called big time community leaders. They don't want to come down and hear from and listen to what the people have to say. And when the people speak, then they want to get mad at the people and act all crazy in the head. But that's the way they do. I'm glad that we have at least a couple of representatives that don't mind coming and listen. We have had numerous conversations with Ann Westbrook, and she has been able to sit to the table with us and learn. You know, sometime I've had an old saying that goes, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And that's why I asked Ann earlier, did she invite labor to her event? Because believe it or not, we have to work. And labor plays a big part of this neighborhood. Labor pays a lot of the bills in the neighborhood. And again, we're going to ask you to give us your event that's coming up and give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about it if you can.
Sure. Well, I'm going to thank you for prodding me on that first, because it's important to remember that folks who work, union folks, unions basically make more equitable workplaces. And all the studies show that women do better in unionized environments, that Black workers do better in unionized environments. So labor's been at the forefront of DEI in some ways. And so I'm going to thank you for prodding me on that. I will send that out as soon as we log off. The event I've got coming up is I serve on a committee called the Freedom to Be Heard Committee. And we are doing a series of events in the state of Georgia. There's one that's already taken place in Atlanta last week, where we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're inviting community members to come and speak on that and tell us what it means to them, where they want to see this go. The phrase has become very politicized, and folks who oppose progress and equality and all the things that we are fighting for are really trying to hijack that word and turn it into something else. We want our spaces to look like our state. We want, diverse workspaces, diverse schools, diverse neighborhoods, communities, all those kinds of things. And we know in Savannah, we've got a long way to go. So on Monday, August 26th, the committee will be here in Savannah. It will be 6:00 at Hotel Indigo. It's something that we are doing with the group American Progress Rising. So if you want to learn more about them or about this concept, you can go to their website. I've also got out on my social media a sign-up form for anyone who wants to come and testify to the committee. We want to hear from you. This is about our listening to you, not talking about what we think about this. So please do join us.
Okay. The state of Georgia has been known to publicize the fact that it is a right to work state, and that the big factories can come here and work for less. But when they come here and work for less, is that helping our people? No, because our people are not making a livable wage. What do you see in the foreseeable future of getting Georgia's minimum wage to a living wage?
I mean, I think it's something we've got to address and we've got to be working on. I mean, and much like the debate around housing, the state of Georgia preempts local governments from doing much around this. They can obviously make decisions about what they pay their own employees, but they can't set any kind of benchmarks for other employees who come into the community. And so that's an issue. And, we're very much on defense on this issue in the General Assembly. We're having to try to beat back, further efforts to weaken those kinds of, living wage advances for workers. So again, I think that's something that we've got to work on. If I could leave people with anything, I hope it's that your state government has tremendous power over some of these issues. And I sometimes sense that people are closely following the presidency. They're closely following what, the latest thing that Trump said, or the latest thing that Buddy Carter said or did, or they're focused on, their mayor and council. But there are so many aspects of life where the decision makers sit under that gold dome in Atlanta. And so I hope that people will get interested in that, because your state government is telling everyone in the state now, we're not going to come up with solutions for affordable housing. We're going to preempt anybody below us, or local, from working on that. We're going to preempt, gun safety. We're going to preempt living wage, workers, rights of workers. So I hope that people will get interested in that. Look for races in my chamber where you can be helpful to helping us grow our numbers, because, in the House, we're on track to kind of keep gaining power. Georgia's growing. We're getting more diverse. We're getting folks who come to Georgia from other places where maybe they did enjoy union protections, or maybe they come from a family where they enjoyed those union protections. And so let's take advantage of that, and let's use that to build the state that we want. If we want to live like we want, if we want the policy we want, if we want the representation that we want, we've got to get engaged in these state races, because that's where a lot of the decisions that affect your community are made.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it. We've got exactly 4 minutes left. Natavia, you want a closing statement?
Sure. I just want to say, since we're all Democrats, I believe we're all Democrats on here. I really enjoyed the DNC first night last night. It was so much high energy, and it looks very promising for Democrats going forward. So that's all I wanted to say.
Reverend Maynard, your closing statement.
Yes. Speaking on housing, as we would say, I'm stuck on housing right now. Affordable housing. Let's make it affordable, and affordable for who? Affordable for our people.
Yes.
All right. And you got the last say so besides me, so I'm gonna let you go.
I just want to say thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk with y'all. It's been a little while since I've had one of these conversations where we really kind of get into it. We get into the meat of the issues, and it's so, so important. So thank you for having me. Thank you for providing this forum for folks in our community to be informed and engaged and mobilized on these issues. It's a great service that you do to the Savannah, Chatham County, and broader region. So thanks so much.
Well, we thank you for being with us. We thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. This is the vulnerable community, and that's why we call it that, the vulnerable community, so that we can be able to get the issues to the people and let them understand what is going on in our neighborhoods and how things can change one way or the other. That's what it's all about. But until next week, we'll be right back here next week, and we'll have another guest on that will be very informative, and we'll have all kind of information for you. We'll be looking for each and every one of you back next week, right here on the Vulnerable Community. Until then, goodbye. God bless.
God bless you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
like that.